So when I tell you that hearing the person you love sound completely done with the marriage does not always or does not automatically tell you what your marriage will look like 1 year from now. I'm not speaking from theory. My wife Lola and I have been together for more than 20 years, and we're now more than a decade beyond the marriage crisis that led to a divorce petition. And about 5 years ago, um, we had an epiphany. We had a situation with the clients. Together, we worked with clients, of course. Welcome back, by the way. And but anyway, let's go back a little bit. Right, 5 years into our marriage, I threatened divorce. Years later, it was her turn. Lola had checked out, and I was still emotionally trying to hold on to the marriage. The more afraid I became of losing her, the easier it was for my desire to save the marriage. The easier it was for it to come off as neediness and pressure, and it just got worse and worse. And I didn't understand yet that wanting your marriage and chasing your marriage are not the same thing. Let me say this a better way: fighting for your marriage or fighting for your marriage, yeah, sounds the same, right? They're not always the same thing. And then I later worked with another woman, like I was saying earlier, right? 5 years, about 5 years ago or so. And her husband had spent much of their marriage openly expressing that he did not want to be married. Like she had tried communication, counseling, and unfortunately, she didn't have a chance to create a lasting progress until she met us. She still wanted to know one thing. Before she met us, she wanted to know one thing: if he doesn't want this marriage, is there anything left for her to do? And this is a question that a lot of people ponder on, as you can imagine, right? So we've got an interesting one today. In fact, let me tell you something. We all always we do tons of research, right? So research gives the that question more nuance than most people realize. A national study of about 3,000 married adults found that divorce thinking was dynamic rather than automatically final. About 31% of people thinking about divorce at the first measurement were no longer thinking about it just 1 year later. So, another national study of people thinking about divorce found that most relationship repair behavior actually happened privately and through self help rather than external intervention. So, today I want to show you what happens when rejection turns your desire to save the marriage into pressure and how to keep pursuing reconciliation from the part of the relationship that you still control. You do have a lot of that. So we're going to unpack what we call the rejection chasing cycle. All right. And this is triggered by rejection, right? But rejection leads into panic and then proving and then pursuing. Let me put that on the board real quick, right? Rejection usually leads into panic because rejection breeds obsession, right? It leads into proving, okay? All right. And this will be some of the traps that you need to avoid. I'm going to break them down. Okay. All right. And proving leads to pursuing. Okay. Actually, more like chasing. Right. And let's see here. Let me put this here actually. All right. So that leads to chasing, and that leads to pressuring, right? All right, leads to pressuring. Okay, and pressuring leads to shrinking, and that gets worse because what happens is that pumps through the cycle all over again. It gets worse. Okay, then and for every time you go through this, they can't trust you. Okay, they can't trust the idea of being in a long-term relationship with you, right? And yes, they might stay, but they will basically continue to tamper with the quality of your life, and of course subsequently the quality of a marriage you would create with that kind of person. All right. So my name is Ola, and with my wife Lola, we are co-authors of the books. Number one red flag and Get My Marriage Back. This book's right here. Okay, you can get them anywhere. Now, before we dive into today's breakdown and unpacking this cycle you're looking at, if your husband wants a divorce, your marriage is actively in crisis right now, and you cannot afford to wait for this live breakdown I'm about to do in the next 5 minutes. Over the next 5 minutes, figure it out. You don't have the time to figure it out piece by piece, and you feel like you need the help. All you have to do is go to getmymarriageback.com/discovery right now and book a one-on-one discovery session with me so we can map out the exact scenario privately. Okay. So now the most dangerous part of hearing I want a divorce from your husband. It's not only the sentence, it is what rejection can make you do next. Fear tells you that you have to act immediately, prove yourself quickly, and somehow make your husband understand why leaving is a mistake. And that is where trying to save the marriage can quietly turn into chasing, which, like I just said, will just basically make that person run away even further. All right. So this is triggered by rejection. It's triggered by rejection. And mistake number one that most people make, most ladies make if they find themselves in this situation, is treating his decision like an emergency that you must reverse today. Okay, let's put that on the board. Hold on one second. Treating his decision like an emergency. And the key word is it has to be treated today. The reality is that, none of that is true. Okay. But your mind, the panic you're going through right now is going to make it truth. The feeling is going to feel like it's truth, and feelings and perceptions are real, right? So, and this is the number one mistake that you're going to make, right? Panic makes everything urgent. You want another conversation tonight. You want to communicate, right? He's a terrible communicator as far as you're concerned, and you want to communicate regardless of the timing, right? You want an answer about counseling. You want them to go to counseling. You want him to acknowledge your changes. You've asked him for, to seek help. You want reassurance that divorce is not final, or the decision for divorce. You want that reassurance that it's not final, and you're missing the whole point, right? But you see, fear-driven urgency creates pressure because you've even said so much already, right? Because again, if that idea of communication, if it's working, it will be working, but clearly it's not working, right? So in our own crisis, the book describes how Lola had checked out while my intentions were not to be needy. But long before that, we also told a story on how we got to a point where family were so involved, and I got one point I got flared up. I said I'm not interested. I think because I had told her a long time ago, which was a terrible mistake, that listen, I have no problems with divorce. A lot of people say that, and they say it like it's just like walking in the park. It's a dangerous thing to say because you see, when it comes to marriage, it's driven a lot by how we think, how we feel. And if you start sowing those seeds, it goes a long way. It will eventually come back out, to rise to the top. You can eat up your marriage. And when it was time that she checked out, I didn't know what to do with myself, right? And of course, I became more needy and needy. Either way, when you don't know, when you operate from a place of panic, so you see it's coming from both sides, happen on both sides. When you're operating from a place of panic, when you're operating from a place of fear, you're going to come off needy regardless. So what do you do with that? We're going to talk about that, right? So it was never my intentions. It was never none of our intentions to get into that space, but when you get caught up in your emotions, all kind of things will happen out of your control. Why? Because you're trying to control things you can't control, starting with the other person. You're trying to control the other person. Yes, and you can actually do that with good intentions. Okay, so that's something you want to pay attention to. So panic now goes from panic to now you have to prove yourself, right? You go from panic, you go to having to prove yourself. And what's wrong with proving yourself, right? Like not normally, like what do you mean by proving yourself? Maybe not proving yourself, right? Maybe more like validation seeking. Maybe more like you want to you want to make a point. Okay, so proving is more like an argument, right? You have my point is you have a point. You have a point you're trying to pass along, and the other person is not getting your point. So mistake number two, right? That most people make when they get into this phase, that they are turning their growth into evidence. Let me put that right. So you start, you heard you've been following Men of Prestige, so you know that you're supposed to work on yourself, right? So what happens? You start to go through some processes. You start to, and you're looking for immediate result. How do you do that? You're turning your growth into evidence that should be the reason why you should stay. You're still connected to his move. So let me put that on the board, right? Trap number two, turning your growth into evidence. Now, your growth is for you. It's for you. Now, I'll tell you why this is very, very, very important. This is very different. Turning your growth into evidence. All right. There's a place you get to in a journey, right? In life journey, where you start usually like after 40. We don't have to press this too hard on you, right? Because you've realized that everything else has failed, right? You start to realize, you look back, you do some inventory, you do some accounting, and you start to realize that everything you do outside of making sure you're happy first, right? Which doesn't mean selfish, by the way, ladies. It doesn't mean selfish. It just means you're happy, meaning you're taking care of yourself. You have self-care, self-love, self-respect. Everything you do outside of that, they tend to work backwards. They tend to work against the overall goal of having a well-rounded life, right? And of course, well-rounded life will include your marriage, right? But sometimes you take your attention away from yourself only to build the marriage, right? And that works against your goals. All right. Hold on a second. There's noise here. All right. So turning your growth into evidence is a terrible trap that a lot of people fall into. Once they engage, like, okay, I think I need to work on myself, right? You start saying, I've changed. You explain what you're learning. You make it every conversation. You see a post on social media, the first thing you do is you share it to your husband, who is literally on their way out of the marriage, right? So they look at it, they stare, like, just discard it, right? Because it comes off as manipulative, it comes off as needy, it comes off as clingy, right? And those were all opportunities, right? And you point out everything that you're doing differently. You start to say, okay, you become a little bit too obsessive with the process of reconciliation, right? Why? Because you're still feeling rejection, right? And the worst part about that is that it's still coming from the source. What is the source? We're going to talk about the source in a little bit right here. So now you start to overdo yourself. You start to try to pour from an empty cup. You become even agreeable, you become available, you take care of him. You might even wake up at 4 a.m. to take care of him. Now, all those things, there's nothing wrong with doing those things for your husband ordinarily, right? The motive is what becomes a problem. It's the same difference between pursue, which we're going to talk about, and chasing, right? There's the same difference. One is motivated by fear. The other one is motivated by fear and panic and rejection. And the other one is motivated by a simple interest. Like, you just have interest. Like, of course, you want to take care of your husband. Of course, you want to cater to your husband, right? That's something you do from a happy place when everything is good, especially if it's earned it, right? So, and you don't want to become a performative personal growth person. That's what I'm trying to get at here, right? And that's what happens when you're proving. It shows up in your arguments, it shows up in your actions, and before you know it, you start chasing. And that's trap number 3, confusing dignity-based pursuits with constant access. Let me put this here right now, okay? Confusing dignity-based seduction with chasing. All right, so now obviously there's nothing wrong with a woman learning her seductive powers and using them in a way that actually serves, in a way that actually brings value to the man, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But there's a place you get to that can come off as needy and clingy, and you get the gist, right? There's a place where it comes off as obnoxious, like you're coming off as, and you want to be careful with that, because again, what is motivating your action, right? There's a difference between manipulation and manipulation, which is based on influence. Sorry, manipulation and seduction, right? A lot of people will say, well, seduction is manipulative, right? Well, it depends. We're talking about the human experience here, so you cannot just zone everything in on dictionary meanings. You have to be careful with the dictionary meaning. Dictionary meaning means what it means, but when you start to translate it to the human experience, they can start to take on a different meaning. Why? Because there are two people involved, right? You mean something, the other person is receiving a different. So you have an intention and you're taking some action, but your impact on the other person can take on another meaning entirely, right? So, what am I talking about here? There's influence, right? There's manipulation and there's influence. There's in business we might even call it persuasion, right? One is bringing value to the other person. The other one is not about value for the other person. It might be short-term value to try to manipulate the other person, right? The other one has more of a long-term oversight. You can see that far. You understand that the certain actions you take right now, it has a long-term positive impact on the other person, rather than, oh, let me make them feel good right now so I can get what I want. And what happens? You go back to equilibrium. You go back to exactly what you were before that. And that's the problem with proving and chasing, as opposed to learning your seductive powers, okay, which always come with value. When I say value, not just short-term value, but of course short-term value. So how you talk is everything. The way you speak to the person, how it lands on the other side, that also become a big deal, right? How you frame your words, your ownership in your words, that's a big deal. We're going to talk about that in a second, which is why we teach people to use I words, right? The I word, we have to be careful as well, because it's not as simple as it sounds, right? Because you see, more than, I mean, again, we're reading a lot, right? Which is a good thing, right? But now we have to really start talking about application, because we don't have a shortage of information, okay? So, and that takes me to trap number 4, okay? If somebody's saying, I need space, right? Your husband has come to you, I need some space, I need time, right? Or they outrightly say to you, like, I don't think I'm in love with you, right? That's crazy. I'm sorry if you've gone through that, by the way, but the book Get My Money Back, it was, by the way, the book, you have to read it 10 to 15 times, okay? Go find it. It's called Get My Marriage Back. It's probably pinned into the description as well. The book warns directly against reacting to, I need space, I need time, I don't love you anymore. It warns against begging for affection. It distinguishes between giving space from ignoring someone, right? If somebody's asking you that you need space, I want you to know for a fact that you probably need more space than them, okay? And you probably can't realize it yet, because rejection breeds obsession, right? But just wait and see. You probably need more space, because it's probably an indication that you've lost yourself. Now, pressuring leads to shrinking. Trap number 5, right? You're making saving the marriage your whole identity. This is a big deal, okay? You've lost yourself. I intentionally jumped to number 5, guys. Making saving the marriage your identity. Okay? So what do you think is going to happen if you do that? You're probably going to mess the marriage up even more, because you skipped, just like I just skipped number 4, trap number 4. You skipped the most important part about all of this, yourself. Okay, you didn't intend to do that. It's just what happens, because the idea of saving a marriage that's falling apart, that's going through the ditch, it takes a lot of energy away from you. It consumes a lot of energy, and you better know what you're doing if you're moving from that space. Do you understand? You have to know what you're doing, because if you don't know what you're doing, like most people, you're going to mess it up even more, right? So, for example, right now, your mind is saying, where is trap number four? Where is trap number four? You're actively looking for that, right? Your mind is looking for that. The same thing with the marriage. A marriage is not going to function. The marriage, a good marriage, is a function of uh, two different people. No, not alike people. Just two different people who knows how to forgive, who knows how to navigate, who knows how to develop themselves long term. Okay, who is open? People that are open-minded, people with emotional intelligence. Okay, it can start with one person, but eventually it needs to be both people. Not it. It has to start with one person. Okay, it has to somebody, especially if there's been damages. Somebody has to. We have to break that cycle. Okay, there's a cycle that's feeding itself here over and over, similar to the cycle you're looking at right now. So let's go back to the actual pressure point in this. Once you get to this point, right, from pursuing to pressure, there's no stopping this cycle. It feeds on itself. It will eat up the marriage. See, pressuring under here, right? This is the point where losing your identity actually starts, right? Because the more you try to prove yourself that you're getting better, that you deserve this, that you were right all along, that this person is, you do all of this in the middle of an active argument on a day-to-day basis, and then the other person, of course, they shut down for the most part, and which aggravates you even more, right? Once you start doing that, do you know why they shut down? Because they feel pressurized. They don't feel like staying in the marriage is their decision, right? So if you keep doing that, it feeds into you losing yourself even more. And if you've lost yourself, they can't recognize the person they probably fell in love with a long time ago, right? So what do they want to do? They want to run away even further. So you experience withdrawal, right? And when you experience withdrawal, what happens? The rejection feels even worse. And then if you did go to panic in the first place, when you felt rejection, guess what you're going to do again? You're going to do the same thing over and over again. And the cycle feeds on itself. And this is why I skipped number 4. So let me give you number 4, right? Making every interaction about the marriage. Similar, right? But it started with that. Losing your identity started with that. Making every interaction about the marriage. If the person is still living in the same house with you, effectively, they're in the marriage. They're not gone. There's some kind of value they're getting from staying in the marriage. It might not be wholesome. It might not be something that's sustainable, but there's still some kind of value that they're getting from being in that marriage, right? But you can't recognize it because you feel rejected. So now you go through that cycle over and over and over and over again, and it gets worse until nature itself will have to break the cycle. And if you allow nature to break that cycle, usually that means divorce. Okay, so look, I'm teaching you right now what we call the universal roadmap that people go through once they experience rejection from their spouse, from their partner, from their husband. And every marriage has its own unique hidden landmines. If your husband, if they've expressed to you that they want divorce, or he's just not involved in the marriage like that, and you want me to look specifically at at your relationship blocks, just go to getmymarriageback.com/discovery. The link is also pinned into the description box. All right. Some of you are realizing that the divorce exit statement is not the actual issue. It's probably just a way for them to get you off their back on a day-to-day basis, but they're somehow enjoying some part of the marriage that gives them some kind of stability. Maybe you have children together and they don't have to worry about the children, and they're just living in that funk. Sometimes people will live in a funk just because they can't see past that. Like, it's a funky life, but they've concluded that it's always going to look like that way. But you know that that's not the quality of life that you want, right? You're realizing for the first time that the issue is identifying the pattern that has created this destructive path. And we need to identify what that is in your marriage. It could be so many things. It could be in-laws. It could be your husband himself, which is probably why you want him to be held accountable to as well. It could be intimacy. It could be your mouth, maybe the way you speak. It could be his way of speaking. Maybe it could be so many things, right? Uh, Whatever it has become is now one of the children in the house, and now you have to worry about it, and that's not okay, right? So either way, if you it's a very complex thing usually, right? If you want me to help you look at it, to help you navigate and help you figure out what the next best step is so you can actually build the quality of marriage you're looking for, just go to getmymarriageback.com/discovery. Okay. Now, let's move forward because I've got some more to share with you. I want to share your personal power cycle with you, okay? Because this right here is a great place to start from, to start fixing this immediately. If you cannot control whether your husband chooses the marriage today, because remember, you can't treat this like an emergency. You probably are already, but stop, right? If you can't control how much he wants to stay in the marriage today, what does saving the marriage alone by yourself actually look like from the side you still control? Because a lot of time people will say, well, you can't save the marriage by yourself, right? Says who? Right? Says yourself. Well, that's usually an indication that you've been giving your power away to another human being entirely, and it's no wonder why you find yourself here. But what do you mean? You needed both people to come to the table, and yeah, I know, right? But the cycle would never really start that way. Remember, it's a cycle, right? So it doesn't start that way. Usually, if you have a bad cycle that's going on, at the very minimum, somebody has to break the bad cycle. At the very, even if it's just breaking the cycle, because when you break it, right, you create what we call a interruption of pattern, or pattern interruption, right? You break that, and then it gets the attention of everyone involved. It's called influence. You have the ability to do that always, but you have to know what you're doing. Okay, so saving your marriage alone does not mean doing the work for work of two people. That's not what it means. It means refusing to waste the power you still have by trying to control the part that you don't have. It is actually an indication of controlling behavior when you say things like it takes two people to tango. It's usually an indication of controlling issues. Okay, you've tried it and it didn't work, so you're resentful about it. So you say it out loud as a talking point, right? So, but then you stay in the marriage. So why don't you just leave, right? You're not leaving because you know that's not true. Okay, you both are feeding the cycle. That's already happening, by the way. That is already happening. So instead of going to a place of panic from rejection, I'm going to teach you something a little bit different. Instead, we're going to go to grounding. We're going to go to grounding. Okay. And I'm going to tell you what grounding means. Remember, I was just talking about source, right? Okay, everything you've been doing has been coming from your source. Your source has been your feelings. You've been caught up in your feelings. Not just you, probably the other person, which is why they effortlessly feed the terrible cycle that is breaking the marriage actively as we speak, right? So you go from a place of grounding. We're going to go through this cycle today, but what do we mean by grounding? First of all, right? It means you start where panic started, right? See a place where you go from rejection to panic. You say, wait, what? I feel panicked. You acknowledge that it's real because this is a marriage at the end of the day and you clearly don't want it to end, right? Grounding means you stop treating every divorce statement, every marriage statement, every cold reaction, every stone walling, every malice keeping, every silent treatment, every refusal to talk. You stop treating those as instructions to react. Granted, all those things are happening and they will happen in life sometimes because the other person is probably using them as a coping mechanism for them to survive their own emotional trauma or emotional chaos going on inside of them, right? So there's no doubt that there's nobody that's happy to stay in a funky marriage. There's nobody that's happy to come home and sit in a car in the garage longer than they should just because they're trying to avoid contact. There's nobody that likes that. But sometimes people do what they have to do when they're caught up in their feelings, right? All sense of morals, all sense of doing the right thing will go out the window. That's how humans work. Regardless of how much we try to moralize this, it never works. You know why? Because human beings, at the end of the day, they need to survive. And In this time and age where money is not the issue, information is not the issue, technology is not the issue, a lot of the weight is on emotions, right? So people will emotionally do what they have to do to emotionally survive. Something you should pay attention to. So, but nobody likes to do that. Is the point I'm making, right? So there is rejection. Yes, there is rejection. We want to acknowledge that you do want your marriage. Yeah, yes, that's it. So because you want your marriage, you panic, you have fear, and everything is now that's driving the crazy cycle where they're so comfortable taking you for granted. Because when rejection breeds obsession, right, and you start to show up in an obnoxious way, in a way that is needy, is clingy, they want to run away from you, they want to withdraw more because they're actively also seeking clarity to know what they want to do, right? Same way you are, but that's creating a bad cycle. Okay, so again, grounding still means you acknowledge where you are. It means you acknowledge also that you don't control his decision, and it's okay to let go of the idea of trying to control his decision. Okay, so what happens? You return back to your higher self, you return back to gratitude. It becomes your source of emotional stability, which eventually will become a source of emotional safety for the environment you're going to create. You go back to your faith, you go back to your health, the source, self, you go back to better sleeps, right? That's tough. It can be tough, but again, it needs to start from that's your intentions as well, right? We need to start with that intention. You go back to your life work, your life mission, your life purpose. We're going to go back to those things that matter the most in life at the end of the day. I keep telling you, see, when people say marriage is not an achievement, I get it. I know where they're coming from, even though it's a shitty statement, because at the end of the day, they shouldn't feel the need to say that if it was true, right? But the reality is that people put so much weight on marriage itself and they completely dismiss the idea of working on self because it sounds like a broken record. Okay, we get it. Work on yourself, self-development. Okay, we get it. All right. You know why? You know why? Because it's hard. It's easy to move in the direction of panic. But to go to grounding, which is what I'm talking about right now, is going to take work. So you have a few choices, right? When you experience rejection in your marriage, right? You can go in the direction of panic, right? You can go in the direction of panic, which is easy. Okay, panic. What I mean by easy is that it's effortless. Okay, because you want to save your marriage, right? Right, it's easy, right? It's it's no friction, frictionless. Okay, frictionless. It's a natural thing that happens when you want to desperately save your marriage, right? You go in this direction, right? But we also know, like I showed you earlier, is that it's a destructive path. Because what happens is that it makes the other person take you for granted. The only thing they can see is that you're needy, and they can also see that they're trying to run away from for whatever reason, whatever the internal emotional chaos they have going on, which is why a grown man will feel the need to shut down on his own marriage. Like the idea of a silent treatment in your own marriage, there's no empowerment in that. That should tell you everything you need to know. Okay, but your mind doesn't tell you that. Your mind tells you you feel rejected, so you go in the direction of panic. Anyway, from a place of grounding, it's now a lot more easier to go towards a life of purpose. Okay, so what I'm sharing with you right now is actually what we call in our framework, we call it the three core pillars, right? So from a place of purpose, you're able to go into self-discovery. You're this process, and particularly because of the pain you experienced with rejection, you're going to be discovering more about yourself, which is a good thing. See, it took a process to get to this place, right? It's a good thing, right? It's a process. You had to put yourself out there. You had to take risk in life. Marriage is not for the coward. Okay, marriage is not a cheat. No, marriage is not for the coward. It takes courage to get into marriage, right? Because you're literally relinquishing. Is that the word? You're letting go of certain control of your life to other people because they have the power to destroy you. How? Well, because if they reject you, it affects you in the way it's been affecting you right now, right? So they have that kind of power. But actually, there's a lot of power in letting go in life. One of the hardest things for human beings to do is letting go. And you're going to learn how to do that through this process because the reality is that you're just one human being. And if you want to have an awesome life, it's not going to be as simple as you controlling everything. No. But there's no such thing in life, regardless marriage or not. There's no such thing. The winners in this life, they identify the things they can control and they let go of the things they can't control. And they focus on the thing they can control. They become a point of leverage for them. So for you as a lady, one of them is your seductive powers. You manage to get that person to marry you, right? Oh yeah, that worked, right? It worked until it didn't work anymore. When did it stop working? At the point that you felt a sense of rejection, right? For whatever he did. Remember, I keep focusing on what you are able to control, right? I don't know what he did. It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, I promise you, because you have a power of influence. Remember, we're talking about your personal power right now. You have a personal power of influence that you've disengaged from, and we're going to engage them. How are we going to engage them? By literally leveraging the pain that came from rejection, because now you're going to discover so much more about yourself. Do you understand? So now when you engage grounding, purpose meaning you have something you're engaged in that's bigger than life itself. It's like letting go pro max, right? You're going to that next level where it's no longer just about this life you're living in right now. You're thinking about your legacy. You're engaged in those things. So instead of all this energy that gravitates, that goes in the direction of panic, you're redirecting that energy from that pain into life, into your life mission and your life purpose. And what happens with that? You give time, you give space. You give space for the right processes to happen with the other person. So they take you for granted a lot less. We're going to talk more about that, okay? So from grounding to purpose, your husband becomes the center of your emotional universe when you go through the panic route, right? They become like every interaction feels like life or death. It's not true, but it becomes true if it's your feelings, because your feelings are valid and perception is real, right? See, it's a little tricky, right? So purpose gives your pain somewhere productive to go. Your career, your children, your health, your friendships, all your friendships, including your friendship with him, which you've put on a back burner because you're obsessively trying to save the marriage. So the friendship doesn't matter anymore, because why? What happens? You end up spending most of your time holding him accountable. You're not paying attention to the friendship. So when I say friendship, start with your friendship with him, but also your friendship outside of him. You've put all those things on the back burner. You no longer hang out. You no longer take care of yourself anymore because you're obsessively trying to save the marriage. And rightfully so, because it's a marriage. I understand completely. Okay? All right? I had a young lady I work with. She was actually a professor in real life. And she had a life, full of life. But yet the marriage crisis she was going through had become a repeated question of whether her husband truly wanted to remain married or not. It's worse when it's a question. See, when somebody said they want divorce, sometimes that's a relief that they actually told you. But when you're not sure of where they stand, especially if they're threatening with the idea of leaving, they travel a lot, and he withdraws a lot, he's shut down, it's like stone cold, like somebody who doesn't really engage already is now acting like they're not sure where they're gonna be, right? Imagine being in a marriage with that kind of person, right? That's precisely repeated rejection over, and when you're not sure of where you stand with your husband, that's repeated rejection over and over. So of course you panic. Of course you're going to create more pressure, which makes them even withdraw even more, and that cycle will get bigger and bigger until nature breaks that cycle if you don't break the cycle. How do you break that cycle? You have to go back to grounding. You have to go back to your life mission, your purpose, and then self-discovery automatically. When you discover more about yourself, naturally, you start to exude value. Value start to come out of you. How do I know? I just know because now you've been spending time on yourself. And the more you navigate this path, the easier it gets. In the beginning, it's very hard. Remember I told you it's easy to take the route of panic because it's effortless. It's feelings. Feelings doesn't need your help. It's just always there, right? So now you go this route and now you're at a place of value. When I talk about value, this is the first time you're seeing this. Because why? Because I'm not talking about moral values, okay? Moral values is I'm a good wife. I'm a good person. I deserve better. Even though if you did, you would have it, okay? You desire better. It's more like it, okay? Just because you desire doesn't mean you deserve it, right? Just because you're a good person doesn't mean you deserve a good marriage. Okay, all right, kumbaya, I guess it does, but not really, because clearly that's not the result you have, right? The reality is that the winners in this life, they take the bulls by the horn, they move with courage, they understand that sometimes bad things happen to good people and vice versa. So they're not gonna leave things in the hands of fate. They don't just they might say it is well, but they know that it is well when you actually do the work. They might say, yeah, I pray, yeah, but yeah, prayer without work is dead. Faith without work is dead. So when we talk about value here, we're talking about experiential value. You experience, you start feeling good about yourself, not just you feeling good about yourself because you're performative, you're faking it. Oh, I just love myself. No, it's none of that, right? It's actually something that the other person will see. They will feel it. Okay? They will feel it. How? Because you're no longer spending time being needy and spending all your time worrying about them. You're spending your time on your life mission, your purpose, and those are attractive things to do. Okay, so now they're curious. They become curious. Hold on 1 second. Hold on 1 second. They're curious. Sorry about that. My baby almost came into the picture, but I had to stop her. All right, so curiosity. Because you're no longer just spending all this time worrying about them, right? So they get curious, and that's effectively attraction. Okay? All the anxiety you had been feeling is now passing on to them because they were so used to seeing you. They wake up, they see you in the same place. Let me guess. She's about to argue. She's about to ask me questions about the marriage. She's about to tell me where did I go yesterday. She's about to nag me like I'm one of her children. You're no longer giving him that kind of power again, right? It's no longer that case. Well, and you were not performing. You were actually spending all that time in grounding, in setting a purpose for your life, and then self-discovery. You're working on yourself, your friendship, your health, your life mission and purpose, your career, that next level you're trying to get to. You spend all your time. You don't have to exit the marriage to do all those things. Okay, as a matter of fact, this is directly building the marriage because now you have value that you're bringing to yourself first, right? And that shows to other people. You don't bring value to other people by you don't bring value to other people by letting yourself go. You don't do that. In fact, you're working against yourself. Okay, the way you do that is you build self, and self has enough to pour into this world. And generally speaking, other people have no choice. It's not a matter of choice now. You have the choice, right? And they don't have the choice than to wonder what you're up to. When he wonders what you're up to, that's curiosity and that's attraction naturally happening. He stops taking you less for granted, and then he's able to see clearly that he's not as good as he thinks he might be, right? Because that's the illusion that we all have when somebody is coming off needy and clingy, and then we start to feel ourselves, start to think too highly of ourselves, right? Because you're spending way too much time obsessing over him. The marriage is the marriage. It's a piece of paper. It's a function of the relationship, the underlying relationship that you have with yourself, and you being able to pour into other people around you. Okay? And now, if you want anything, you can actually get what you want because you're no longer just coming off as needy, right? But It starts with re-engaging yourself, but more so better from a place of self discovery, right? You have self is the source of sustainability here, right? So when you experience self discovery, you now have enough value to continue to pour. And so can rejection still happen? Yeah, it can still happen, because oftentimes it's a personality issue. Maybe that person just has this personality, they can't argue too much, right? And sort of you feeding that crazy cycle that makes you feel rejected even more, you give some space now. So next time you feel a sense of rejection, you know exactly what to do. You go back to grounding, you go back to re-engage your purpose, you go back to self-discovery, and the more you're able to navigate this cycle over and over again, if you're able to go through this cycle over and over again, you build trust. Okay? You build trust, and you build safety. Yes, a man needs to feel safe around you as well. Okay. And you build security. I know, right? He needs to feel secure, right? And if you're able to do this as a lady in your own relationship, that is your seductive power. Okay. It means you're leading with value. You're leading with value. So this is what we mean when we say seductive. You're leading with value. It's not manipulative. It has intrinsic value built in yourself. You stop needing him when you no longer, it's funny, when you no longer need a person, suddenly they need you. It's interesting. Let's make that red since we call it seductive, right? Since you no longer need him, suddenly he starts to need you. It's the way human beings have an intrinsic need for connection, right? Since you were obsessing over connecting, he had way too much oversupply, right? So it lost its value. That's in addition to the fact that you're not improving your own value, right? So it gets worse. It's a vicious cycle that people find themselves in. Okay. So, yes, rejection can still happen again, right? And the symptoms you experience right now can happen, but the more you're able to navigate this cycle, the less you will see it, right? Because now they suddenly need you, right? So, before we wrap up, let me leave you with this, right? If today's lesson makes you think you found yourself, makes you think, I'm talking about your marriage. Yes, I'm probably talking about your marriage, right? Don't go back to guessing. Don't go back to guessing your way through it. So knowing this rejection chasing cycle and navigating the personal power cycle, they are easier said than done, right? For an average person, you need skills, because bad habits are your bad habits. They get you where you are right now today. So you need you need reps, and you need guide through those reps. You need support, right? You need a system, a framework that you can actually walk through over a period of time. It goes a long way in helping you, because remember, you do this over and over again, it becomes second nature, and then you create a whole new experience, and then people will look at you and then they envy you, and the losers will call you lucky. Because they didn't see that part, the pain that you flipped into a meaningful life, which aka a marriage, a fulfilling marriage, right? So every relationship has their own history. That's the reality. Personalities has their own stories, their own blind spots. And your husband saying he wants divorce may look like the whole problem, but underneath that statement, there can be attraction loss, it can be resentment, it could be unresolved betrayal. What do you mean resentment? He doesn't have any resentment. How would you know? That's the whole point of resentment. It's quiet, it's silent, it's a sniper, it's a slow poison, slow but steady poison, right? So it could be years of pressure, it could be emotional withdrawal, it could be communication breakdowns, separation, without having a structure, or a completely different pattern specific to your own marriage. And that's why I offer a private 1 hour discovery session. We'll spend 1 hour looking at your specific situation, identifying what's actually happening in your relationship, in the underlying relationship, and helping you gain clarity on your next best step. And if you're ready for that, just go to getmymarriageback.com/discovery. That's getmymarriageback.com rejection-chasing.com/discovery. The link is also in the description and the pinned comment. Now, his desire for divorce does not require you to surrender your personal power. Saving your marriage alone does not mean you're carrying the responsibility for his choices. That's why people get defensive and say, hey, it takes two or to tango. That's defensive energy. It's probably one of the issues you had in the marriage, okay? What it means is that you develop your side, the side of it that you control. You're also effectively, in real time, you're giving space, right? And giving space is not the same as giving up. It's two different things, right? And pursuit is not the same thing as chasing, okay? And for you as a lady, we're not going to use the word pursuit. We're going to use the word seduce, okay? Because it's an internal power. It's power that you already have, but you have to know how to use it. You have to know what you're doing, right? And your growth stops working the moment it becomes a performance. So we cannot fake any of this. It has to come from a deeper place, right? That's why we spend majority of the time working on yourself, so you can have enough to pour into other people. If you do performance and you create some kind of reconciliation, it will be short term. It will be short term. It's not gonna last. Okay. And you've probably gone through that before. You probably had some back and forth here and there. You notice that it doesn't last because it's not coming, you haven't built a proper foundation for it, right? So divorce thinking can change over time. It's dynamic, it's over, it's not permanent. That's why they haven't left yet, okay? But it can become permanent because nature will break that cycle at some point. But don't build your life around predicting what the future may hold. We need to learn how to live in the present. Very, very important, okay? And it's actually the key to lasting reconciliation and then building a fulfilling life and marriage, okay? So if this helped you, you understand what to do, you've seen this, you know that this is a real thing right now that is very possible, and you found some value in today's session, please hit the like button, share, subscribe, turn up your notifications so you are notified when we go live. And if you're looking for me, you know where to find me. Just go to getmymarriageback.com/discovery. Hopefully you've been enlightened, educated. Take care and God bless. Peace.
Are you fighting to save a marriage or a relationship, or simply avoiding to end up in a broken or toxic one?
We've been there and you're in the right place. You see, inside this book, right, you will find and you will discover the secret to save a broken marriage, and you will learn how to build and attract the marriage of your dream.